God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Then God punished Pharaoh for having a hard heart. That is the sentence most of us are carrying. It is not the sentence Exodus writes. Exodus reports on Pharaoh's heart 7 times before it ever puts God's name in one of those reports. 7. You can count them yourself, in order, with a pen, in about 4 minutes. Most of us never counted. Nobody told us there was anything to count. We were handed the hard part and asked to make our peace with it. One honest word before we start. This will not make the problem disappear. Part of it stays hard, and I will walk you into that part rather than around it. But the order is real, you can count it, and almost nobody says it out loud. Before we open Exodus, you and I have to stand somewhere else for a few minutes. A tomb. In 1888, a man named Wallace Budge bought a roll of papyrus that had come out of a grave at Thebes, in southern Egypt. It hangs in the British Museum in London today. Its owner was a scribe named Ani, and his roll was painted about 1250 years before Christ. I am not going to tell you that is the century of the Exodus. Scholars have argued over that date for 200 years, and nobody knows for certain which pharaoh this story is even about. Exodus never gives him a name. I do not need the date, and I do not need the name. I need one smaller thing. This is what Egyptian religion looked like, in Egypt, in the world this story is set in. Painted on Ani's roll is a courtroom. Osiris sits on a throne at one end. 42 judges line the room, a single row of painted faces, all of them watching. In the middle, a god with the head of a jackal crouches over a balance, a set of scales, the two-pan kind you have seen in 100 paintings, standing taller than a man. On one pan sits a heart, an actual heart, drawn as a heart, lifted out of the man who is standing right there watching it happen. On the other pan sits a feather, one ostrich feather. It belongs to Mahat, who is truth and order and the way things are supposed to be. And the test is not the one you would guess. The test is not whether the heart is good. The test is whether the heart is light. Light passes. Heavy does not. If the pan holding the heart goes down, an animal is already waiting beside the scales. The Egyptians painted her with the head of a hippopotamus, the shoulders of a lion, the jaws of a crocodile. Her name means the devourer. She eats the heart, and the man does not go anywhere after that. He is not punished. He stops. One more thing happens in that room before the weighing, and you will want it later. The man speaks first. He recites a list, and every line on that list is a denial. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not killed. I have not made anyone weep. 42 of them, one for every judge in the row, spoken out loud into a painted silence. And then they weigh his heart anyway. That is the part I would not want to stand in. You can say all 42, and mean them. The speech is not the evidence. The organ on the pan is the evidence, and it does not take instruction from your mouth. Egyptians feared that pan enough to fight it with their hands. They carved a beetle out of stone, about the size of your palm. They laid it on the chest of the body, directly over the heart, and wound it into the linen with the rest of the bandages. Hundreds of them sit in museums today. London, New York, Baltimore, Brooklyn. Cut into the flat underside of nearly every one is a short speech, and it is addressed to the heart itself. It asks the heart not to talk. Do not stand as a witness against me. Do not oppose me in the tribunal. Sit with that. A man goes into the ground holding a stone that begs his own heart to keep quiet at his own trial. That is the religion Pharaoh runs. He is not a bystander in it. He is its living God. Whatever else he may be unsure of, he knows exactly what a heavy heart means. Now open Exodus. The Hebrew word the plague chapters keep reaching for is Kabed. It does not mean stubborn. It means heavy. It is the ordinary word for weight, a load on a cart, a famine pressing down on a country, arms too tired to stay up in the air. Hebrew uses more than one word across these chapters. The differences between them are worth a video, and somebody has already made it. This one goes somewhere else. This one is about weight, and about the order the weight arrives in. Because look at what that one-word choice does. The Hebrew text measures the king of Egypt with the exact instrument his own religion used to condemn a man. It never calls him proud. It never calls him cruel. It says his heart is heavy, and in his own courtroom, on his own scales, that is not a personality trait. That is a verdict. I did not think of that, and I want to be careful with it. An Israeli scholar named Sarah Ben Reuben published the connection in 1984. John Currid, an Old Testament scholar, built it out in a book on Egypt and the Old Testament. And scholars disagree about it, sharply. William Propp reads the heavy heart as nothing more than a blocked mind, a man who has stopped being able to take anything in. So hold it as a strong reading, not a settled fact. Nothing I am about to show you leans on it. Before we count, let me say the real question out loud, not the way people say it in a study group, the way they say it in their own heads. If God hardened the man's heart, what exactly did the man do wrong? And why am I supposed to be at peace with that? I have almost never heard anyone ask that at normal volume. It gets asked quietly, late, by people who have believed for 40 years and would never say it at the table. It deserves better than a shrug. So, the count. This is the part I want you to be able to repeat to somebody in a kitchen. Open Exodus chapter 7 and read forward with one question. Not what happened, not what it means, just this. Who is doing it? Chapter 7, verse 13. First plague, the water. The King James reads, "And he hardened Pharaoh's heart." Look at the Hebrew underneath, and there is no he. The verb sits in the form Hebrew uses for something that simply happens, and the thing the sentence is about is the heart. Pharaoh's heart grew strong. No hand on it, no name attached. The translators added that word because an English sentence wants somebody doing something, and the Hebrew handed them nobody. Stop there for a second. A great many of us met the hard version of this story on the very first page, inside a word that is not in the original. Verse 14, one line later. Now the word is heavy, and it is not an action this time. It is a description. The way you would say, a door is stuck. Pharaoh's heart is heavy. Chapter 7, verse 22. Second plague. Same shape as verse 13. His heart grew strong. Nobody named. Chapter 8, verse 15. And here, for the first time in the whole sequence, the text names somebody. The frogs are dead. Read the 2 verses just before it. They piled the frogs in heaps, and the land stank. That is the moment, not a victory. A country holding its nose. Pharaoh sees that the pressure has lifted, and he makes his own heart heavy. The verb changes shape here. It moves into the form Hebrew uses when one thing makes another thing happen, and that form has to name who did it. It is not God. Chapter 8, verse 19. Slow down for this one, because of what happens in the first half of the verse. Egypt's magicians have kept pace the whole way. Moses turns water to blood. They do it too. Moses brings frogs. They bring frogs. Then the third plague comes, and they try, and the text says plainly that they could not. So they walk to their king and hand him 6 words. This is the finger of God. His own experts. His own priesthood. The men paid to defend the system, telling him the system has lost. And in that same verse, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Plain form again. No name. God is not in that sentence. Nobody is in that sentence. The man hears the truth from the people paid to deny it, and closes. Chapter 8, verse 32. Pharaoh again, named again, doing it again, with his own hands. And Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also. Chapter 9, verse 7. The livestock die in the fields. Pharaoh sends men out to check whether Israel lost any animals. They had not, and his heart was heavy. That is 7 reports, across 3 chapters, across 5 plagues. In 7 of them, the God of Israel is not the one doing it. Not once. In 2 of them the text names the doer outright, and the name is Pharaoh. There is one more thing in those verses, and it explains how so many of us ended up with the order backwards without anybody lying to us. Look at the tail end of verse 13. His heart grew strong, and then 4 more words. As the Lord had said. Verse 22, same tale. Chapter 8, verse 19, same tale again. So in 3 of the places where the Hebrew names nobody at all, the narrator turns and points back at what God announced in chapter 4. He is not telling you God did it. He is telling you God saw it coming. 2 different sentences. They sit side by side on the page, and at reading speed, in English, they fuse. That is not a translation scandal. That is how fast any of us read a story we already believe we know. Then comes chapter 9, verse 12. The boils. And the sentence finally changes. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. 8th. Not first. 8th. And notice which word the text picks for that 8th one. Because it switches. The heavy word is gone. This verb comes from a family of words that mean to grip, to seize something and fasten onto it, the way your hand closes around a rope you have decided not to let go of. It is the same family behind a phrase you already know from later in this book, when God tells Moses he will bring Israel out with a strong hand, a hand that closes. Hold the 2 pictures side by side, because Exodus set them side by side. A heart getting heavier, 1 plague at a time, by a man's own doing. Then a hand closing over it. You can hear the difference. One thing accumulates, the other thing holds. So, here is what the chapter is actually saying, and it is not what most of us were handed. God did not put the weight on the scale. He stopped Pharaoh from taking it off. And even that is not the end of the man's own hands. Stay in chapter 9, because the next stretch is the strangest in the whole story. The hail comes. Pharaoh sends for Moses, and says something he has never said before. I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. That is not a negotiation. That is a confession, in his own mouth, with the theology correct. If you were reading this for the first time, that is exactly where you would expect the story to turn. Then the hail stops. And 22 verses after the Lord first hardened him, the text says this: He sinned yet more, and hardened his heart, he and his officials. Same word as chapter 8, same form, same doer. That is after verse 12, after God has already begun. It never becomes a story with only one hand on the scale. Now the part where I have to be straight with you, because if I skip it, you will find it yourself, and you will be right to be annoyed with me. The order is clean inside the story. It is not clean before the story starts. Chapter 4, verse 21. Before Moses has even walked back into Egypt, God says, I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. Chapter 7, verse 3. Again, with a different verb this time, the one that means stiff, the word for clay left out in the sun. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart. So God says it in advance, twice. Those verses are in the text, they do not go away, and anybody who tells you otherwise is selling you something. What you do with them is where the oldest argument in the church lives, and a word count does not settle it. 1 reading. The announcement is foreknowledge. God knows what this man will do, says so ahead of time, and then confirms him in what he has already chosen 7 times over, in daylight. The other reading, God decides. Pharaoh runs on rails, and Paul says something very close to that when he quotes this exact story in Romans 9. Whom he will, he hardens. People far more careful than me have spent whole lives on that question, and landed on both sides, reading the same page. I am not going to hand you a tidy answer I do not have. What the count gives you is smaller, and I think more useful. Whatever God is doing in this story, the story does not open with it. 5 plagues run first. 7 reports run first. A confession runs in there somewhere too. The man is given room. He uses the room. And what he uses it for is written down, verse by verse, where anybody can check. There is one detail inside that count I have not said out loud yet. It is the one that stayed with me for days. Go back to chapter 8, verse 15. The first time the text names Pharaoh as the one doing it. What is happening in the room at that exact moment? The frogs are dead. The heaps are outside. Nothing is dying that morning. Nothing at all is pressing on him. He does not harden while the pressure is on. He hardens when it lifts. And the same thing happens again in chapter 9. He confesses while the hail is still coming down. He hardens after it stops. You may know that motion better than you would like to. It is not the night in the corridor when you promise God everything you have. It is the Tuesday 3 weeks later, when the results come back clean, and you cannot honestly remember what you promised. It is the prayer you meant with your whole chest in February, and cannot find in your mouth by June. It is the apology you were going to make while you were still afraid of losing them. Relief is not a neutral thing. Relief is where most of the forgetting gets done. Which brings us back to the balance in the tomb painting, and to a man buried with a stone on his chest, asking his own heart to stay quiet. Egypt weighed the heart once. At the very end, when the man could no longer do a single thing about it. That is the part of that religion I keep turning over. In that courtroom, the trial is a formality with a fixed answer. You can recite 42 things you never did, and the pan still falls the way it was always going to fall, and the only move left to you is a piece of carved stone telling your own heart to lie on your behalf. Exodus does not work like that. Exodus weighs this man's heart 8 times in 3 chapters, out loud, in daylight, while he is still standing there and the frogs are still in the river. Every one of those weighings is a place where it could have gone the other way. There is no scarab anywhere in Exodus. There is a door, it keeps being opened, and a man keeps looking at it and deciding. God did not put the weight on the scale. He stopped Pharaoh from taking it off. And Pharaoh had put it there himself, in daylight, with witnesses, 5 plagues running, with his own priests telling him what it was. And one more thing, for whoever needed this count in the first place. Maybe you have carried this question quietly for years. Maybe you have sat in a study group and heard somebody explain it away in 15 seconds, and said nothing, because the explanation did not fit, and you did not want to be the one who made the room uncomfortable. That silence was not a failure of faith. You were not being disloyal. You were being careful with something you love. Nobody checks the arithmetic on a story they do not care about. You found the problem because you kept reading. That is the only reason it was ever there for you to find. And the pan that Egypt weighed once, at the end, when nothing could be done, you are not standing in that courtroom. The scale is still moving.